Hello, everyone, and welcome into Devil's Digest TV in our 2026 Fall Camp Preview. I'm Adam Beadle here with publisher Hode Rubino. And Hode, we're just days away from the Sun Devils kicking off their preseason preparations.
Yeah, it's kind of funny how you always think about the off season being endless, 9, 10 months, and because there's so much activity going on, transfer portal, spring practice, a lot of NCAA lawsuits, for and against, and obviously the fresh news, which we're not going to touch in this podcast, but the fact that maybe just maybe, if you're a member of the 2022 recruiting class, you might get another extra year of eligibility. So how does it affect not only ASU football but other ASU sports, other teams around the country, around the Big 12? That's going to be interesting. But yeah, when you got so much news going on in the off season, that fall camp date really sneaks up on you.
Yeah, incredible timing. That news came out like just minutes before we started recording this podcast. So I'm sure we'll touch on it later. But we are going to talk about a lot of different things in this session, particularly pertaining to the offense. And Hode, of course, I think the number one question that's in everyone's mind heading into this offseason, or excuse me, this preseason, is the starting quarterback battle. What is your look on how that's going to play out this preseason, and what's your sort of prediction right now?
Well, I mean, I do believe that the competition is still wide open, but I do also believe in some respects, and I'm you know, trying to be careful with my wording over here, but it probably is, and maybe probably with a capital P, Cutter Bowley's job to lose. Now, don't get me wrong. I mean, I don't think he had a bad spring by any means. I mean, sure, he ended spring on a much stronger note than he started. I don't think anybody would deny that. But in terms of separating himself enough from the competition, that has not taken place yet, and that's not a bad thing. I don't think people should be apprehensive about that. I know that people are always going to talk about the fact that Cutter Bowley does come with a resume that did include 12 interceptions when he was a starting quarterback for Kentucky last season. And yes, spring practice for him did start the first week or two with some interceptions, but he did get better as spring practice progressed. And I think that we did see him connecting with a great group of wide receivers, which I know we're going to talk about in a few minutes. I think the chemistry is there. I also think that his athleticism, which maybe was not considered his calling card when he came to ASU, I think we saw a lot of good things in that area. So I don't think if Cutter Bowley is going to be the starter, he's going to be picked because of the lesser of all evils. And like I said many times before, no quarterback that you're going to bring in from the transfer portal is going to be perfect. But I also feel that maybe some folks are playing up just a little too much of the deficiencies, especially the interceptions that Cutter Bully did have last year. And I just don't think there's any way when you talk about proven quarterback evaluators like head coach Kenny Dillingham, like offensive coordinator Marcus Arroyo, that if there was like a laundry list of question marks surrounding Cutter Bowley or any other quarterback they would bring in, I really doubt that he would be a Sun Devil, for the last 7, 8 months. Now, I'm not shutting the door on Mikey Keene. When you have a grizzled veteran like him, who definitely has an impressive body of work at both Fresno State and UCF before that, that's not something you can ignore. And I think that in terms of really understanding the playbook, I don't think anybody would really surpass a guy like Mikey Keene in that area. The fact that he did sit out the entire 2025 season at Michigan because of injury, you just kind of wonder, is that something that affected him in spring? Because I thought he was up and down. Is it something that can still affect him in fall camp? I think that's going to be a huge storyline. But Mikey Keene is somebody who can definitely challenge Cutter Bowley, as can true freshman Jake Fetty. I think he was definitely impressive in spring practice. Did not look like a freshman. Did not play like a freshman. I mean, sure, he had some ups and downs, but I said on the previous podcast that in my 27 years now covering ASU, I've seen a lot of true freshmen like Jake Fetty really have a strong spring, but then the freshman factor, quote unquote, kicks in fall camp, and maybe things get a little faster, a little more complicated, and that's where veterans, in this case maybe like Mikey Keene, can really surpass a guy like Jake Fetty in the rotation. Assuming Jake Fetty is somebody we consider right now above Mikey Keene. But I think that Jake Fetty is definitely somebody who can make things interesting, both as trying to be the backup quarterback for Cutter Borley, maybe even challenging Cutter Borley for starting position too. So competition is still wide open. I think Cam Dyer, obviously a guy that just last year was really recovering from an ACL injury, is probably maybe the odd man out in this quarterback competition. Curious to see what 2027 can bring for him. But it's a wide open quarterback competition. I still think Cutter Bowley, when it's all said and done, is gonna win this role. But he's definitely have to work his butt off because Mikey Keene and Jake Fetty, I think, are definitely breathing down his neck in that regard.
There are a lot of different position battles of a sorts going on, especially on the offensive side of the ball. I think this one's going to be the most fun to watch, but there's a couple other ones as well, and we'll kind of continue to move down the ladder here. Moving to running back, saw a lot of great depth from this unit during spring practice. Of course, they brought in a lot of talented guys, and there might not be a star of sorts like Raleek Brown or like a Cam Scadaboo that ASU's had in the last couple of years, but one thing's for sure, and I think Kenny made this really clear, is there's no shortage of backs that he can turn to in 2026.
Yeah, everybody's wondering like, does this running back by committee finally going to happen? Sean Aguano, the running backs coach, promises it every year, and it never happens. But although all jokes aside, I think Sean Aguano and ASU had very good reasons to have that bell cow. I think ever since back, 2019, and Benjamin, have that approach happen each and every year in Tempe. There definitely was good reason for that. I think with like any position, Adam, it's a matter of okay, I got so many talented players, but do I really have a starter? And that's only not only for running back, but really for any position on any team, not only ASU. So how soon does the cream rise to the top in
Mm.
fall camp? That's going to be the big question to me. Without going over each and every running back because the list is long, I would say that if there's going to be a rotation, let's say, of three primary running backs, for my money, I feel it's going to be Tyson Brown and Marquise Gillis, the transfer from Delaware State. I think when it's all said and done, they are going to separate themselves in fall camp. Whether it happens the first, second, third week, remains to be seen. But that's what my gut feeling really tells me. Marquise Gillis, and you were there in spring practice like myself. You knew that we didn't see much at all from him the first couple of weeks because he was injured. But man, when he was healthy, and I've been really big on Marquise Gillis ever since spring practice even started. And when spring practice began, and here he is sidelined by an injury, I was thinking to myself, oh man, all these props I was giving him are going to be for naught. But in those last couple of scrimmages, Adam, I mean, my gosh, you know, explosiveness, speed, strength. It's like I said in a previous article, he's somebody that I'm going to be really careful comparing to Cam Scadaboo, but
Yeah.
just maybe in one regard that when the defender was facing Cam Scadaboo running downhill, they made the quote unquote business decision. And I think Marquise Gillis, out of any running back on this team, is the one that a defender think once, think twice, think third. I'm going to tackle this guy because he is really a force to be reckoned with. David Abbott, another FCS transfer, he from being from Villanova, has been really pegged as a short yardage guy. But you and I saw in spring practice, I think he's an excellent and underrated receiver from the backfield. So I think that really adds to his opportunities to be on the field, and obviously definitely one of the better blockers in the running backs group. But Carday Mack, I mean, really impressive freshman. Jason Brown had a breakout game in the Sun Bowl. Grayson Greshevich, somebody who did have a strong spring himself. Man Robinson obviously played a lot as a true freshman and definitely saw some flashes in the spring. Sean Aguano's definitely has a hard decision to make. But again, you just have to make sure that even you got this great group of running backs, that when you're going to be settling on the 3, 4 running backs that are going to be the main in the rotation come the season opener September 5th, that you're really going to pick the right guys. But again, if you're asking for predictions from me, I really feel that Tyson Brown and Marquise Gillis are going to be the primary running backs again, with David Abbott being that short yardage specialist.
Putting you maybe a little bit on the spot here. Is there, we've heard Sean Aguano and Arroyo talk a lot about the opportunity for ASU to be able to go out on the field and use two running backs. Is there maybe two players you think would be best, two running backs that would be best fit together on the field at the same time in that type of scenario?
Yeah, I think if you want kind of the lightning and thunder, I know it's one of the worst football cliches out there, but a guy like Madman Robinson, who's definitely the lightning, if you will, or Grayson Richardson, I think those are guys that maybe in 20 personnel, yes, I would expect them to see them on the field, in those cases maybe. But again, 20 personnel doesn't have to be the lightning and thunder approach necessarily. You can have just, two absolute tanks in Marquise Gillis and Kyson Brown. I'm not forgetting about Jason Brown, who, maybe just a tad less in stature, but definitely doesn't lack anything in strength. And again, going back to the Sun Bowl, he's one running back that, when given the opportunity, man, did he shine. And I know people are going to talk about, well, it's only a bowl game, and Duke was not a great defense to begin with. But at some point, Adam, you don't have to apologize for your opponent. You don't have to apologize for the schedule, playing a bad team, because it's still incumbent on you to do your job and do it well. And Jason Brown did grab the opportunity and did do it really well. I think he's one guy that, if he does show the consistency, which maybe, again, we're talking about going back to the freshman factor, maybe that's something that does kind of hurt Carday Mack as fall camp does progress. But if Jason Brown can be that consistent running back that maybe the coaching staff did not see from him all year long, and that's why he barely saw any snaps until the Sun Bowl came along. And I saw some snaps against Colorado and did well too. But maybe he's the I don't know, the X factor, in this race, and in far of having a rotation spot, which is higher than some people expected.
Well, let's keep moving down the ladder. Despite the loss of Jordan Tyson, it's probably not a stretch to say, in my opinion as well, too, that this wide receiver room is a little bit stronger than they were just a season ago, and maybe has the potential to be even better than 2024. What do you like about this group?
Well, look, I think the fact that ASU brought in two top 10 transfers in wide receivers, in Amari Miller and Reed Harris, uh, you know, you have players like that coming, so many accolades, and you think like, okay, how is this all going to work out in spring practice? Not only are they coming to a new team, they're also coming to a new quarterback, and a quarterback that him himself is not really all that comfortable with the scheme, just being his first spring practice in Tempe. And we saw a lot of great things from that from those combinations. Yeah, I think Miller and Harris were good for at least one or two highlight catches each and every spring practice. And I think we're almost doing some injustice talking about those two wide receivers a lot and not mentioning the local kid, Raiden Vines Bright, who people in the know in Washington told me that they weren't too happy that he left Mont Lake. So I think that, basically, you have a very, very good slot wide receiver, and sure, he's battling guys like Jalen Moss, and he's battling a guy like Derek Asubio. We did have to miss spring because of an injury, but you're talking about a guy in Vines Bride who's 6'1", 200. So obviously a very physical slot compared to what we've seen in years past. So it's still versatile to play all over the field, but also a very, very good blocker. And as you know, if you're going to play wide receiver for Hines Ward and you want to see the field more often than not, you better block. So I think that Vines Bride is a very, very good blocker in that sense. And I think Miller and Harris can get there too. So now that you have a guy like Jaron Hamilton, still I think the fastest wide receiver on this team, come off the bench. And you have guys like Jalen Moss and Derek Asubio, who've shown that when you gave them chances last season, they did reward you quite nicely. I think there is really a lot to be excited. And you talk about a guy that came out of nowhere in spring practice, Uriah Nelms. Maybe it'd be hard for him to find some playing time with a very, very crowded wide receiver room. But he's somebody that, if he continues to have as good of a fall camp as it is spring, I think you're going to have to be forced to give him maybe 5, 7 snaps each and every game. So there's definitely a lot to be excited with this wide receiver group. And if I tie it into the quarterback battle, I almost feel like whoever is going to win the job is really going to have a great, great group of wideouts that are going to make him look like $1 million because we've seen a lot of great things from this wide receiver group. And kind of crazy to say this that you're losing Jordan Tyson, but collectively as a wide receiver group, you're having a group that I would easily put up there in 2024 with Melton Stovall and Xavier Guillory as really one of the better ones we've seen this century.
It certainly is a problem that ASU isn't necessarily sad that they have so many talented wide receivers on their roster. We'll see how that plays out during fall camp. Let's move to the tight end room. Head coach Kenny Dillingham said earlier this week that Kamari Anderson, who was slated to start this season for ASU, is still recovering from an ankle injury and won't be able to fully practice until much later in the fall. Can the rest of this group fill the void? And is this maybe the time for a guy like AJ Ia, who came out of high school, super highly touted, highly recruited, to step up?
Yeah, everybody's waiting for AJ to break out, and I know there are a lot of expectations on him his freshman year and in 2025. But it took him still time to really understand the playbook to a level that would make the coaches feel very very comfortable. Playing him. I think his blocking is still something that needs to improve, and as it improves, that's how much more we're going to see him on the field. But like you said, in fall camp with Kamari Anderson, all but guaranteed to miss at least I would say the first 2 3 weeks of August, or at least be very very limited. This is a great opportunity for AJ Ia with increased reps to really have that breakout season everybody's expecting. But my subscribers know that I've been talking quite a while about Tulane transfer and Anthony Miller. I think that he's the most well-rounded tight end on the team. I think he definitely did show some flashes in spring. And don't get me wrong, Kamari Anderson, but again, I know you were there too, so you can vouch for it. He did have a great spring.
Mhm.
And it's really unfortunate that he had that injury. And not only had the injury, but had it so late in spring that now his preseason preparation come fall camp is being affected. But I think that Anthony Miller and AJ Ia, being 1-2 in the rotation or being the two tight ends out there when they do play two tight end sets is going to be something that can really help. If ASU just fill that void that Kamar Anderson is leaving behind while he's being sidelined. One guy that probably hasn't been talked about a lot is true freshman Landon Meary. He was here in the spring. He did very well. Kind of got lost in the mix just because of all the veterans that I mentioned that were ahead of him and did play well. But he's somebody that I would be on the lookout. And again, just because Anderson is sidelined, that gives more opportunities for guys like Landon Meary to really shine. That much more. I wouldn't be shocked if maybe some way somehow he's going to be the number 3 tight end in the depth chart in the rotation. Obviously, with the caveat of Anderson still being out. So tight end group can be really really interesting. But when you have such a great tight end coach like Jason Mons, he can figure out what has to be done and needs to be done with the absence of Anderson, which again is going to be temporary. I mean, he may miss a season opener, but wouldn't shock me to see him back for the Texas A&M game, let alone for the game against Kansas and London.
Jason Mons is certainly one of the more vocal coaches on Arizona State's staff. And another one of those as well is ASU's offensive line coach, Saga Tuateli. And we talk about this offensive line. This is a group that's got a lot of new faces, a lot of new depth players. It's kind of just mumbo jumbo. There's a lot going on. There's certainly a good amount for ASU to figure out. Dillingham said the starting 5 is more about the best combination of players and not necessarily the best player at each position earlier this week. So when it comes to finding the right chemistry at this group, what do you think who do you think will end up as the starting 5 at the end of fall camp?
Well, when I did posed that question, ironically, just a few days ago to Kenny Dillingham, and I said, okay, you have the center in Tana Altupalo set and left guard with Makai Stewart set. What's going to happen with the other positions? And he quote unquote scoffed at me and said, well, I don't think those two positions are set either. But I think that suffice it to say that Tana Alotupala is going to be the starting center. Had a really nice career at Georgia Tech. Anybody who followed college football last year knows what a great ground attack they had. So obviously they did succeed due to his contributions, and not despite them. Makai Stewart as a freshman ended up being really the answer that ASU was looking all year long, supposedly at left guard. So I definitely see him as a starter. After that, Adam, I agree. It does get interesting. It does get little muddying of the waters, if you will, as far as who the other starters are going to be. If you go left tackle, I think that Champ Westbrooks and Jalen Clem are going to battle it out, and I think that's going to be one of the stronger position battles, out there. Then right guard, Rob Lupano and Wade Helton are probably going to be the two primary players that are going to battle for that position. And Lenny Lopano and Oklahoma transfer Luke Bolenko are going to be those at right tackle battling there. Maybe there's a name that I don't mention that this has a better than expected full camp and is able to really upset that order that I just mentioned. But if I was a betting man, right now, I think that's what the two deep is going to look like. And again, just like running back, I mean, sure, you got a lot of talent, sure, you got some fierce position battles. You just want to make sure that whatever decision you're going to make when it comes to two deep, when it comes to the starters, is going to be the right decision. And again, chemistry is really going to reign supreme. And I think that the chemistry is something that also really is derived by the strong team culture. So I know Kenny Dillingham said, and rightfully so, that maybe one player just chemistry wise doesn't really mesh with some other players and thus can lose his starting position or lose his 2D position. But I think overall, when we're going to see that starting five go out on the field on September 5th, I don't think there's going to be any great surprises, and I would be mildly surprised if any of those uh, players who I did not mention are really gonna ascend to be in the two deep, let alone the starter. So even though there's a lot to figure out, I do feel that the better players have somewhat differentiated themselves during the spring, and that's probably going to continue all throughout fall camp.
When you look at the big picture as a whole, what do you envision of this offense for Arizona State this season?
I think it really depends what kind of lessons they learned, from last year. And I think that two things that really did hurt this offense is one, they let that injury of Jalen Moss have them be married ball and chain to that two tight end set, and they frankly just did not have the personnel. I know Cameron Harple did come off strong towards the end of the year, and maybe things worked a little better then. But maybe Kamari Anderson having a tougher than expected first year in Tempe was something that really hindered going out there and playing with the two tight end set. The fact that they did give Derek Esubio more chances at the slot is something that did pay nice dividends. So you just kind of wonder, okay, if they just really replace Jalen Moss with Esubio, and again, not be so tied into that two tight end set, does the offense look better? I know, we talked at nauseum last season about Sam Levitt just zeroing in on Jordan Tyson, and zeroing in is probably too kind of a term to even use over here. That obviously did not do anything to the confidence of the wide receivers. That's something that's impossible to happen this year, Adam. I mean, I think that Amari Miller can put up very, very similar numbers to Jordan Tyson, and maybe that Colorado transfer karma, works for Amari Miller as well. But it's just impossible, again, no matter who the starting quarterback's going to be, to hone on just one wide receiver, because Reed Harris is definitely a very capable wide receiver. Vines Bright, definitely a capable wide receiver. So that's something I think that by default, again, going back to what a great collective group of wide receivers you have, that's not going to happen anymore. That's going to make the passing game for ASU much more explosive and less predictable than it was in 2025. And another thing that we know that really hurt ASU is really shying away from the running game at times. And look, Sam Levitt and Jordan Tyson, when they were on, they were on. I don't think anybody can really deny that. But it doesn't mean that you have to really shy away from the running back. I'm sorry, from the ground attack more often than not. I mean, we remember that game against Mississippi State. Cowbells and everything. ASU came back from a 17-0 deficit. Why? Because they ran the ball down the throat. Same thing they did in 2024. Just because Cam Scadaboo was the feature running back then doesn't mean you couldn't do it with Early Brown, because he did it. Kanye Udo was no longer with the team. He had the best game of the year. against Mississippi State. So I think the ASU coaching staff is not going to shy away from the ground attack like they did last year. And just like the wide receiver group, you got so much talent. There's really no reason for you to not, ram the ball down the throat if the defense is going to give that to you. And I think there's going to be a lot of defenses in the Big 12 that are going to present those opportunities. Rotation and depth is not an issue with the running back group. So that is something that you really need to be cognizant of. And I also would say just really throw more wrinkles out there. I mean, I know it's easy to throw a lot of wrinkles when you have 1 month to prepare for a bowl game, but my gosh, I mean, the innovation that we saw over there, with a quarterback like Jeff Sims, who I feel had some kind of limitations, especially when you compare him to I think the three leading quarterbacks on this team this year. Now imagine what you can do with a quarterback that's going to be better, and again, better group of wide receivers, better group of running backs. So I think also ultimately when you have better talent, it's almost by default you should have a better offense, and I think we'll see that from Arizona State.
Well, Hoda, I know our subscribers are very appreciative of your input and your insight. This video is just a small taste of several features that we have up right now on our website previewing fall camp. Make sure you check them all out at DevilsDigest.com and give us a follow on Twitter at DevilsDigest. Thank you to our supporters, Santan Ford and Burrito Express. For publisher Hoda Rubino, I'm Adam Beadle, and we'll talk to you all again real soon.